50. These I would call the victims of game theory. These are the guys who offer 0 or 1, mostly 1, and of course it's a terrible thing to do, and by all means, but they even thought more about it to do this sort of thing. Again, the graphs here, this is the 50. You see it's much far to the left than the other population. Another game that from the 10 that I would like to, the centipede game. There is one more game that I would like to talk about here. Of course, that's in honor of Basu. That is the composer of this game, the Traveler's Dilemma game. Imagine you are one of the two players in the following two-player game. Each of the players choose a number between 180 or sum of money between 180 and 300. You get what you ask, but you also get, there is also a transfer of $5 from the guy who said a higher number to the guy who said strictly a low number. So if both of us say 200, both get 200. If I say 200 and you say the 210, I get 205 and you get 195. Clear? I'm sure you've seen, all of you have seen this game. And what is the, let's go again to the table. By the way, of course, the Nash equilibrium here is 180, but Basu, of course, brought it as sort of a very clear case where it's not because of social preferences, but because of something else, that there is a strong tendency of people to choose very high number. Here there is 40% of the people, that's very, by the way, all the results here are very consistent with results that were done in laboratory with a lot of money and so on. We'll come to it later. Here, below the median response time, the fast actions are the 300. That's clearly the instinctive thing to do, to say 300. And then you start to think probably strategically. There is also the group who answered some number between 181 and 294. So what is the reason to answer 234? No reason. It is just a sort of just getting rid of the problem or just randomly choose some number. So these are below the median. And above the median are two groups. There is those guys that probably use what we call the K-level reasoning type of thinking. And in this population, there is about 16% of those with very high response time. And there is also the victims of game theory that answered 180. And again, they thought quite a lot about it. So these are the 10 games. We went through 5 of them. And so again, what was methodologically what I did? I took 10 games and I classified the actions as being fast and slow. I would like but I would like to stick to the word fast, the word instinctive. I would like to stick to the word, or more instinctive. I would like to stick to the word slow, the term more contemplative. That's my intuition, and I try to hint at least to my intuition why those are instinctive and those are contemplative. Since people don't like subjective judgment, I think it's wrong. But since referees and so on don't like subjective judgments, then I went also through step 2. I did it just for referees. And step 2 was the following. I took some students in Tel Aviv, 17 raters, who knew game theory, but did not read the paper and did not talk with me about the subject, etc., etc. And I conducted the following experiment, which was I gave them this. They got a file of 10 pages. On each of the pages there was the game, and then below it there were 2 groups, randomly selected left and right. One group was of the slow, one group was the actions of the faster actions. And I asked them to circle what is the group that they judge as being instinctive. I define instinctive as intuitive, immediate, an outcome of activating gut feelings and not of deliberation and activation of cognitive power. This was more or less this was the definition that was for what is instinctive. Is it clear? So there was fast set, slow set. They did not know that it's fast and slow. They just add the 2 sets, and they add 2 to stick to one of the two groups being more instinctive. The best results for me would be that everybody would agree with me. If this would be the case, you would know one thing, which is that I'm cheating. That's not the case, of course, but I think that overall it was quite a confirmation of the intuition. Namely, you have here the 10 games, and these are the results. So in most of the cases, I won. There are no case I really was defeated, but there were two or three cases where there was more or less a tie. The main reason when I investigated this subject with the students, they were all master students, why did they classify some of the actions as instinctive, although I thought it's contemplative, was that I think that they thought that some immediate strategic thinking, they thought that it was instinctive, where I was thinking that this is an outcome of a cognitive action. But in any case, overall, I think the pictures confirms my intuition, and hereby I declare that whenever I say it slow, it is, from now on, is deliberative action, a contemplative action. Wherever I say it fast, from now on, I will refer to it as an instinctive action. Clear? So the first thing was, I think the first methodological point is very important, and we do it, actually, we need it in anything, again, it's quite parallel to the typology of risk aversion. For saying that somebody is risk averse, you have to declare what is risky and what is not. It comes very naturally to us after studying microeconomics, but often it's not so clear as it seems. But in any case, we need some subjective definition of what is risky and what is safe. Here I need, of course, a definition of what is contemplative and what is instinctive, and that's what I try to establish in these 10 games. Okay. Now we come to step 3. Step 3 is what I will call the definition of the C typology, which is on the spectrum between instinctive and contemplative. Now, when I talk about typology, look, one of the typologies we use in life is that he is a good man, he is a bad man. What do we mean by good and bad man? First of all, we have a definition of what is a good deed and a bad deed. If we disagree about that, then we cannot say that he is good and he is bad. But if we agree on that, and that's actually something, again, this is something which is would be parallel to what I've done in the first stage. After that, what does it mean he's a good bad? At least my experience in life is that I've never seen somebody who did only good deeds or somebody who did only bad deeds. In the Mickey Mouse's models, we have people who are always evil, or in Disney movies, we have people who are always doing evil things or good things. In life, I think that we have people that the difference between a good and a bad man or woman is that the one is doing probably 70% of the cases, he is doing the good thing, and the bad guy is probably doing 45%. So that's at least my experience, that it's not 100% versus 0, but it is on the scale between being always evil and always what we call in Hebrew tzaddik, and between the two, people are spread. Now, so the typology that I'm going to suggest is the following. Who is the guy? Is 0.7. This would mean, 0.7 mean that in 70% of the games, he will take an action which I classify as contemplative. Is 0.4, it means that in 40% of the cases, he plays the contemplative action. Okay? So a type here is the probability that you tend to take the contemplative action. That's my suggestion. And of course, how can I estimate it? I can estimate it by looking at the 10 games. Namely, in the 10 games, I have most of the subjects play, all the subjects that in the sample that I will use now played at least 7 of the 10 games. And then I'm going to stick to each of the subject a number, which is the proportion of times that he played a contemplative action in this set of games that he played. Again, notice not all of them play 10 games because, of course, I rely on what the teachers assign them to do, and not all teachers assign all problems to all students. And therefore, but I took only now when I will talk about the subject, I will take a subject that I have about him at least 7 choices from the 10 games that I described. And the test that I will going to conduct is going to be the following. I'm going to conduct now 10 tests, which together will be one test. I will take the 10 games. In each of I will isolate, every time I will isolate one game. I will calculate the CI, what I will call the contemplative index, based on 9 games. And I will check in what sense it's a good prediction to the action in the 10th game. When I say the good prediction, it's not about the particular action, but it's about whether the guy did a contemplative or instinctive action in the 10th game. That's clear? And of course, what I ideally would like to have is a strong correlation between the contemplative index calculated on base of 9 games and the action is taken on the 10th. Before I continue, when I talk here about correlation, some of your statisticians much better than me, then the correlation test measure that I will use is the Spearman's rank order correlation. And let me say that typically, before you see the results, that typically if you take just standard games and you calculate this correlation between a play in one game and the other, you get a very, very small correlation. Very, very small correlation. The numbers, it's rare to get something in the magnitude of even 4%. It's something which I find very positive about human beings. We are different. We don't do the same all the time. And the correlation between us is much smaller than what seems from the models that we play with. Some people think otherwise. It's fine. I think that's very positive things. But nevertheless, again, here I'm looking for high correlations. Don't expect here are now very huge numbers. I'm giving it as introduction, just that you will not be too disappointed now. And I'm serious about this comment. Okay, so what you see now, you're going to see 10 graphs. Let's just understand one of the graphs, and the other 9, it's just for you to be impressed. So what you see here is the following. And this is for the first games that we talked about, the zero-sum game. Here you have the scale of the CI, the contemplative index, calculated on the base of the other 9 games. It's between 0 and 1. The red bars, these are the proportion which exist in each of the 10 deciles. Okay? So of course you have more in the center. It's very, very few people almost none are on 0 or 1, but you have some spread. What you have here is, what does this mean? This means that 30% of the people in this decile, namely the fastest, the lowest CI, the decile, 30% of them took the contemplative action in this game, namely the action T in the first game. That's the meaning of the blue squares. Is it clear? So again, these are just the bars, is the distribution, how many are the proportion in each of the 10 deciles of the CI based on the 9 games. And this is what is the proportion of people in the 10th game, in this case, the zero-sum game, who played the contemplative action. The black line, of course, is the regression. It's the weighted regression, of course, of these 10 points. And here you have the correlation. So this is a case that you have 9%, right? I don't see it now. So it's 9%, and actually the average correlation that I get here is something around between 8 and 9%, which I think is considered quite high in this type of data. Now, what you should be now impressed by, you should be impressed from two things. Number one is that the lines are going up all the time. The higher CI, the more contemplative you are in the tens. Is it clear what I do here? Here I took off the second game. I calculated based on the 9 and predicted the second game and so on. So you have here the lines. Sometimes they are higher slope, sometimes less. And here always you have the Spearman correlation, which now it's not true that in all the 10 games you get what I hope to. So here's the first 4, here is the next 4, and now comes a little disappointment. In the last games actually, including the, and I understand why, in the Traveler's Dilemma actually I don't get a good prediction of a CI to the play in the tens. I think it's because of the role of the 180, but let's put it, that's for another discussion. Okay, so again, what I did here is a test a test in the following sense. I want to establish that there are some traces to the existence or the usefulness, or whatever you want to stick to, word you want to stick to it, of the connection between the CI based on 9 games on the play on the 10th game. Now I will do the next step will be the phoning. I will try, so I will assume now that there is some meaning to this. There is some meaning to the CI, to this contemplative index. I would like now for games that are not included in the sample to try to see whether the CI based now on the 10 games, does it give me something interesting to say about 11th game, and about another game which is not in the 10 games sample. That's clear? So let me demonstrate two things. First of all, this is the ultimatum game, but this time responder. Responder, namely, I'm telling you, again, the same story. You are bargaining about $100. Somebody offered you $10. Are you going to say yes or no? Surprisingly for me, actually most people, at least game theoreticians, game theory students say yes for $10. I don't understand why, but they do. Less people say yes to $5, which is reasonable, but still quite high numbers say yes to $5 or $10 out of 100. These are the response time of the yes or no crowd. Again, it's a huge sample here, 8,000 subjects. And you see, here, in this case, the response time is remarkably the same. Not only that, look at the graphs. The two graphs are remarkably the same. It's almost copy one of the other, of the yes and the no. The response time by itself does not tell you anything about why people, what does it mean that they say yes or no? What is the instinctive action? To say yes, what I've thought, or to say no, what I've thought that is the instinctive action. By the way, this was a case where my intuition was completely different than the results. I thought that the instinct is to say no, but apparently it's not true, and it's basically the response time is remarkably the same for the yes and the no population. Okay, that's true also about the $5. Also, the graphs are remarkably similar. Now, let's look now, does the CI, just being your tendency to be contemplative in the games, is it correlated in some way with saying yes or no to $10 out of the 100? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes, in the direction that you're more and actually here is actually quite high, actually very high correlation, 17%. That's huge in this type of data. And there is a big, very high slope of the regression, namely the more contemplative you are in the other 10 games, the much more tendency you have to say yes to the $10. Interpretation, I will leave to you. Another example that I would like to demonstrate the use is a contribution, public good game, contribution game. You participate in a game with 4 other players. It's a standard game. In the game, each player gets 10 tokens, you have to decide how to allocate the 10 tokens between two different funds. One is your personal fund. For each token you invest in your personal fund, you and only you will receive $4. And the group fund, for each token any player invests in the group, each of you gets $2. And now, of course, you have to choose. Your decision is how to divide the 10 tokens between the two funds. You may mix up the investment of your 10 tokens in any way you wish. And now your answer is, I allocate the following amount of tokens to the group fund. Okay? Is it clear? That's a standard public good game. Results, look here first. You see quite a distribution of answers. The lowest response time is again for the 5. Again, the tendency of people to split, first of all. And here, this game was not included in the sample because actually there is no split. You remember what I said for the criterion for choosing the games? The split here between above the median and below the median is not clear at all. There are many outcomes, many choices which are more or less on the boundary. And therefore, I cannot naturally classify them as above or below, fast or slow. However, now the question that I'm asking is, is the CI, based again on the 10 games, does it give me some prediction about how people would play in this game? The response time in this game gives me very little, but is the CI of the other 10 games, is it interesting indicator about how you going to play the game, this particular game? And the answer is the following. What you see here actually is, I find it quite interesting that actually the correlation is not here about giving more, contributing more to the public or less to the public. But the correlation here is between the CI and being in some sense decisive. Namely, what you see here is the proportion of people who choose either 0 or 10. So they started probably to think from the 5, but then actually the more contemplative guys got to decide. Some of them decide 10, some of them decide 0. So it is being more decisive in the contribution game that is very strongly correlated with the CI in the 10 games. Let me also show you one case. This will be the last game that I will demonstrate. Is the standard chicken game. You see it on the bottom, the particular payoffs. And here I'm demonstrating it. Just, I think it's very important when people present something is also to say it's not always works. Namely, very often there is no correlation at all. For example, here you have the chicken game. The chicken game, the response time gives you almost nothing. Namely, there is no difference between almost no difference between the response time of the. You see, it's better here between the graphs of those who choose hawk and those who choose dove. The opposite. This dove and this is a hawk, and neither the CI. Namely, the CI completely flat. Namely, there is no correlation. The fact that your CI does not say anything, your CI, you are more contemplative or less, does not give me any information about whether you play, what you play, dove or hawk in chicken, which is very fine, very fine. I don't think that we should expect that it should be the contemplative tendency should be indication to how do you play any game. But probably it's interesting to see what are the games for which it is good indicator for. How much time do I have? 5 minutes?
Another 5 minutes.
Okay. So let me just say that in the paper I also talk about another typology, which in 30 seconds let me describe it. I call it the G typology. The G typology is that who are you? You are, in the C typology, who are you? You are contemplative, 0.8, namely 80% of the cases you are playing actions that I classify as contemplative. It's without knowing this in real life, in real life, we are sometimes saying he's instinctive guy because we don't know anything about the procedure of his choice, but we just observe that he's taking instinctive actions. Sometimes we do have the information about whether the guy is quick or no. We know him very well. He's my colleague in the other office. I know that he always makes a decision very fast. Maybe he's Einstein, and maybe that his decisions are very fast but very clever. But nevertheless, he is a guy that makes a decision. He rejects paper very, very quickly. The other guy takes him a few years. That's the difference. That's some extra information that we have, and we distinguish people between people who make decisions fast and slow. The G typology is a cousin of the C typology, and this time it's not about based on the actions, but it's based on the procedure, or at least based on the time response that it takes him to make a decision. I found the G typology somewhat less informative than the C typology, but again, I will stop here because I want to make some final comments and just let you know that another typology is specified in the paper. Let me, as final comments, let me especially talk about criticism of this paper. Or before the criticism, first of all, some people are interested about whether this being I contemplative type, is it correlated with success? Well, that depends, of course, on the game, not necessarily. In some games, it's the case. In the zero-sum games that I talked about, in the coin and die contest, that's the case. The higher contemplative guys are more successful. In some games, especially in the Traveler's Dilemma, that's not the case. That's not the case because, of course, there are many, or it's more mixed, because, of course, the more contemplative particular game that we talk about. As a criticism, let me mention probably two. First of all, notice that I do it online. I do it online without any monetary incentives, actually in some sense without any incentives. Some experimental economists hate it. Why they hate it? I will attack them and say that this is just barrier to entries that they put on people to do experiments. They will have probably other answers. But let me just say that I've never seen any evidence that really wasting money of the NSF or whatever on paying a subject is something good to do. I think that, of course, the advantage of this system method is that you get huge samples, and huge samples is a big blessing because you don't need to do statistics in order to make conclusion, or you need very little statistics. That's number one. And second, it's more cheap, and etc., and more fun. People are very good, in my opinion, in answering to the question, imagine that you are. We are very good to imagine. And I don't think that if you pay people $3 or $4 with probability 0.2, then it gives you much incentives to think much harder on the problem. As you know, even when people came to countries like India and paid very little money in US, but much money in India, the results were not very different than the results that were with little money or no money. At least my experience in the website, in all problems that I have, I wouldn't say that there is no difference at all between paying or not paying, but I think that from the point of view that we are interested in the results, I don't find any reason to pay people money in order to experiment their behavior. Criticism two is that subjects are students of game theory, and they might actually view the problems as a homework assignment. That might be, but for some, and I am sure that the results here are, in this respect, biased, because some students did take it as a sort of they have to answer the game theoretical. But actually, this would actually bias the results in the good way, because the results are very different from the game theoretical prediction, typically. I think that overall this is not a I should also say that at least my instruction to teachers, I'm sure that not all of them obeyed it, is to give the problems before they teach it in class. But of course, I cannot swear that I'm sure that some did not obey my instructions. What most fun is to talk about this criticism and last criticism, which is I always love to quote referees. And